You are considering investing in rental properties, or you already have rental properties and maybe you're wondering the same question. How much money should you have in an emergency fund should the unexpected happen? Or, in the case of rental properties, should the expected happen? Because there will be expenses and there will be unforeseen expenses on a rental property. It just comes with the territory of owning real estate. So, how much should you have set aside in a nest egg to help cover these things? Unfortunately, I can't really give you that number because that number is going to vary with all sorts of different factors. So, what I am going to do is I'm going to offer you 5 different considerations to help you figure out how much you should have an emergency fund. One thing I would love to hear from you about is, have you been through this? Have you had a rental property that has had an unexpected expense? Or have you gone through the process of figuring out how much you need in an emergency fund? So if you have experience with all that or thoughts about it, I'd love to hear from you. So shoot those over in the comments. So let's dive in. 5 considerations to think about when you're trying to figure out how much money to have in an emergency fund for rental property investing. Consideration number 1, maybe one of the most obvious. What condition is the property in? What are you buying? If you're buying a really old, distressed property, that is very different than buying new construction, for example. So you've got this whole spectrum of possible conditions of this property. If it's older, if it's distressed, if you're planning to add value to it, if you're planning to do repairs on it, obviously you're probably going to need a bigger emergency fund because it's more likely that repairs are going to pop up versus if you buy new construction or just a newer property or a higher quality property, maybe one that's been freshly rehabbed. If you're investing in turnkey rental properties, that's the far other end of the spectrum where in theory you wouldn't need as much in a nest egg because in theory, you shouldn't have as many unforeseen repairs. Also in this property condition kind of category is the property itself. Like if you're buying in a sketchier neighborhood and the general quality of the tenant pool is lower, you might also, consider that in the property's condition because bad tenants can be pretty costly. You may need to have more set aside. So really what you're doing for this consideration of the property condition is, what is the physical condition of the property? Like, where on the spectrum of maintenance and repairs is it going to land? And who's living in it? What kind of neighborhood is it? Is it going to get graffitied? Is it going to get beat up on? Or is it in a high-end neighborhood with an HOA where generally things stay higher quality and, maybe don't need as many repairs? So what are you buying? That is your first consideration. Number 2, do you have a mortgage payment on it? Obvious. If you have a mortgage payment, that means you have an extra payment every month. Versus if you pay cash for a property, you aren't going to have that mortgage payment looming over your head if other expenses are going on. So let's say one big factor with a mortgage payment is vacancy. Let's say that you have an unexpected 6-month vacancy, or you have tenants who have stopped paying their rent and you can't evict them yet. For whatever reason, you're not collecting rent. The mortgage company doesn't care. You have to keep paying that mortgage. So in the case of having a mortgage, you may want to add, or probably should add, a significantly higher amount to your emergency fund just to cover the mortgage payment. Maybe that's 6 months of a mortgage payment. Maybe that's 12 months of a mortgage payment, whatever you're comfortable with. But if you have the mortgage, just realize that whatever the expense is on the property, whether it's repairs or vacancy or otherwise, you're going to have the added expense of having that mortgage payment. Now, I don't say that to scare you away from mortgage payments. I love mortgages. I leverage as much as possible on my properties. And if you're curious as to why, I'll throw a couple links down below with a video about why I like leveraging. And I also wrote about it quite a bit in my new book that I'll put a link into also. So check that out. But again, mortgage payment, it's going to be an added expense on top of the unforeseen expense. So you want to take that into account when you're deciding how much to put in an emergency fund. Consideration number 3, this one may not be so obvious. How many properties do you already own? So for example, let's say you just have this one rental property. So you have your one rental property and you have your full-time job. If something crazy goes on with that rental property, you're going to have to pull from your own income to cover it. If you, let's say, have 4 cash flowing rental properties, or 10 cash flowing rental properties, or 30 cash flowing rental properties, hopefully, in theory, assuming that the unforeseen expense is not happening to all of them at the same time, it usually won't, the cash flow that you make on the other properties during the time of that expense on the one property, to some extent, may help offset that expense. See what I'm saying? So like if you, let's say you're making $200 a property and you have 10 properties. So you're making 2,000 a month in rents. So you have an expense on one of them, but the others, the all of the rest of that income might cover that expense. So then you don't have to pull out of your personal bank account or, wherever. So because you have all the income from the other properties, yeah, you definitely still want to have an emergency fund, but maybe it doesn't need to be quite as high because you have a better chance of offsetting it with the income from the other properties. So that consideration number 3 is how many other properties are providing you cash flow every month to help offset the expense cost. Then, speaking of income, consideration number 4 is how much money do you make? If you are a high-level brain surgeon, for example, you probably make enough money where if something happens on the property, you can just write a check for it. Maybe no big deal. Maybe you don't have to dive into savings. It's like pennies to you. Whereas if you're not as high of an income earner, you may really want to put a big stake in having a solid emergency fund because your income may not be enough to cover whatever that unforeseen expense is. So you want to take that into account, is how easy would it be for you to cover some random expense? And you can use hypothetical ones. Let's say you suddenly have to put a new roof on, or suddenly you have to paint the side of the house because the HOA yelled at you for it. Maybe you have 6 months of vacancy with a mortgage payment. Again, run the hypothetical scenarios to have like at least a dollar amount in your head and say, if that happened to me right now, could I cover that just from my own income? And if the answer is no, then you really want to put more stake in that emergency fund. Number 5, which happens to be possibly my favorite, but it's also the least technical consideration: sanity. Some people are majorly risk averse. Some people are risk junkies, like bring it on. They like the adrenaline, no big deal. They'll figure it out when it happens. Wherever you are on that spectrum, that may change your emergency fund. If you really live for the adrenaline, fine, don't keep it an emergency fund. Just kidding. Have an emergency fund. But, you may have less in there because, you're just not as scared of it. Or the super risk adverse person, you might even need to have like double a practical number just for your own sanity. To me, there's no investment, no matter how high the returns are, worth it if you're losing sleep at night. So let's say that you put all the logistics together and for some reason 10,000 would be a very solid emergency fund. If you're still not comfortable at 10,000, so make it 20,000. Whatever works for you. Like there's one way to look at it, like logistically, how much money might you need to cover certain levels of expenses? But then how much is it going to take for you to just sleep really well at night? Like it sounds dumb, but it's a thing. So always take that into consideration. If the 10,000 is plenty enough to cover it, but you're not sleeping at night, add to it for sure. So again, just kind of running through the considerations of what to think about to figure out how much you need to have in an emergency fund for your rental property investing. Condition of the property, what is it you're buying? The physical condition and, who are your tenants? What are we working with here? Number 2, do you have a mortgage on the property? Because that's going to be an added expense that you have to cover in times of vacancies. How many properties do you own? That's number 3. Do you have income from those to offset an expense on one of them? Number 4, what is your personal income level? Can you just easily toss the money to the expense and no big deal? You barely even think about it? Or do you not earn that much and you need to be planned and prepared for an expense? And number 5, my favorite, sanity. Are you able to sleep well at night? Ultimately, that's what matters. Don't get yourself in trouble. If you're going to be anything, be more conservative in thinking of how much money you want to have in a nest egg. But again, I hope all of those considerations kind of get you thinking about what number might make sense. Run the numbers, run the math. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If it was, please subscribe to my channel. I tried to put stuff out like this quite a bit. I want to get you guys thinking about sometimes what we would consider to be the easier questions in real estate that seem hard. So hopefully it helped. Please subscribe. Check out the links below for a couple other videos that will be helpful, and I'll see you next time.